A pleasant good morning, viewers. My name is Javon Wilson, and I am coming to you live out of 284 Media, of course, out of the beautiful British Virgin Islands. Today, a very esteemed guest. He is the Governor of the Virgin Islands, Governor John Rankin, and today we speak about leading the charge against COVID-19 and, of course, the responsibilities under his portfolio, such as security, as well as the COI, a pending conversation, an ongoing one that requires many answers. Viewers, we have all the details as it relates to that, and also public service when 284 Media returns. So stick with us.
You value traditions.
Today,
You value music. You value education. Family.
I love you.
Service.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love. Life. At Popular, we're committed to you and everything our community values. For the things you value the most, count on us. Popular.
Viewers, welcome back to 284 Media. Now, as promised, a very special guest in studio today, the Governor of the Virgin Islands, His Excellency John Rankin, is here with us to get into a very interesting conversation. Welcome back to 284 Media, Governor Rankin.
Thank you and good morning. It's good to be here, and it's been a busy week so far and a busy week to come, but I always feel very blessed to be here in BVI and look forward to the days ahead.
Absolutely. You just referenced to the fact that we are in a very hectic, busy time. How are you feeling amidst everything that's going on with COVID-19 and beyond here in the territory?
It's a hugely challenging time, hugely challenging time for individual people and their families. And of course, I have been concerned, as everybody else has, at the COVID spike that has occurred, and I offer my condolences to all of those who have lost loved ones, too many people, 37 deaths so far from COVID. So one of my major focuses is, of course, on helping the vaccination effort, continuing to get the vaccine supplies that the territory needs. The UK has supplied now over 35,000 vaccines to BVI, and I want to work with the government and the health authorities and community leaders in urging as many people as possible to get vaccinated, because it's only through vaccination that people can be as safe as they possibly can be from this dreadful COVID.
Awesome. Now, Governor Rankin, you are within the top positions as it relates to leading the charge of this territory, similarly like the Premier of the Virgin Islands and his responsibilities. I want to speak to that relationship between yourself and the Premier of the Virgin Islands. How would you describe your working relationship with the Premier?
I would like to think that the Premier and I have an effective, good working relationship. Obviously, we meet each other in Cabinet, but also speak together on a regular basis in areas of our respective responsibilities under the Constitution, trying to find what is the best way forward for the and its people. Of course, there are sometimes areas where we disagree and we have free and frank conversations, but I don't think that means we don't have a respectful relationship, trying to work together to find common ground.
Awesome. Now, the COI, this is a conversation that has been at the forefront of the territory for quite some time. I think quite a number of months, and I think it's not a conversation that is going to go away anytime soon, especially now that it has been extended. I want to dive right into that. It's causing a lot of disarray in the community, a lot of division, I would say, persons on both sides of the spectrum speculating as it relates to the COI. What would you say are your overall thoughts so far on the process of the COI?
The COI was set up to address serious allegations of potential corruption, potential dishonesty in BVI. And I make no apology for the COI, it has my full support. It's absolutely right that these issues be addressed. What would be the wrong approach would be to sweep these issues under the carpet and not shed light on them. So it's an uncomfortable experience, I understand, for some, but I think it's absolutely right to investigate these issues, and we wait to see what the Commission of Inquiry recommends. It's an independent commission, and as Governor I need to wait to see its recommendations. But I hope that those recommendations will help to address those concerns which led to it being set up, and which will help to lead to better governance in BVI, because where you have good governance, you have stability, you have prosperity, you have success. So the Commission of Inquiry, I believe, can contribute to that process in a very positive way.
Now, I know based on the law, as governor, only you can allow or disallow the extension of that COI. Can you speak to us about why, in your opinion, it was extended for an additional 6 months, I believe, to allow for the process to continue?
That's right. I've extended the Commission for a further 6 months. The Commissioner himself came to me to request that extension, and the extension was granted for 3 reasons. First of all, because the sheer volume of material which is now before the Commission, which needs to be looked at and examined properly by the Commission. Secondly, unfortunately, because some of the material which has been provided in response to the Commission's requests and orders has been incomplete, with material missing, and so more time is required to get that missing material so the Commission can carry out its work. And thirdly, of course, the COVID situation has led to some changes in the way that the Commission has had to operate. So for all of those reasons, an extension was required. The Commission will be back on the territory at the end of August. It will be resuming public hearings in early September. We need to work through that process and get the report, but I believe the extension will precisely allow the Commission to properly address the areas which is important for the good governance of the territory that the Commission does address.
All right. Now, Governor Rankin, I recall back in January, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom, of course, essentially putting on hold a COI that was actually brought against his administration because he believed that COVID should be given priority. All efforts should be directed to handling the pandemic. But just 9 days prior to that, he would have given his consent to a COI being launched here in the BVI, even though we too are dealing with similar circumstances. Do you think that was a fair move, considering the fact that we're weighing the same options? And why do you think that it was important to resume right now, considering the fact that we are also still facing COVID and maybe in the midst of a parallel, which is the hurricane season?
Well, first of all, the COI was actually established under BVI law, established by the Governor in accordance with legislation here in BVI. So it's not an internationally imposed Commission of Inquiry. It's one established under existing and well-established BVI law. Secondly, the Commission, I know, is aware of the COVID situation and sensitive to it, and that's precisely why the Commission set up arrangements whereby evidence can be given remotely to ensure that people can keep safe. As regards the position in the United Kingdom, we're talking about chalk and cheese here. That specifically was a question of a Commission of Inquiry into the handling of COVID, and I fully understand why the British Prime Minister said, let's get through the COVID issue and then have an inquiry on that COVID point. But the COI here, of course, is on a different issue. It's about investigating alleged wrongdoing, alleged corruption, alleged dishonesty, and I don't think we can delay investigation those important issues. And I thank all those public servants and all those who are cooperating fully with the Commission in giving their evidence to it.
So you're saying even in the midst of what's happening, especially in recent times with the constraints that we've had, and of course all of our efforts having to be resorted to handling these issues, COVID-19 and such, you're saying that it is still appropriate for us to continue? Provided
it can be done safely, yes, and the arrangements have been made so that evidence can be given in a safe fashion. And of course, with respect, the challenges over incomplete documentation arose before the current COVID outbreak, so they were not related to that COVID outbreak. The problems came earlier. And so, yes, I believe it's correct and important that the Commission can continue its work in a safe fashion for everyone in the territory.
Understood. Now, many persons are concerned about what they're calling, Governor, a lack of independence as it relates to the COI, and this is because essentially it was imposed on the BVI by the Governor after consultation and agreement with his superiors at the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, who in return are also paying for the COI, contrary to what law says. and who also would have assigned persons from the United Kingdom as well, with most of it, if not all of the staff, or at least some, having done prior work for the FCDO, along with the fact, too, that the commissioner was selected by the governor. Now, considering all of these factors, do you still think that this reflects an independent COI?
I not just think so, I know so. So the UK is covering the core costs of the Commission of Inquiry, and that is allowed for under the Commissions of Inquiry Act, so there's no breach of the law in that respect. But the Commissioner is a senior UK judge. He is not subject to my direction, he is not subject to the direction of the UK Foreign Secretary or the UK Prime Minister. He's entirely independent in his work, and his recommendations and findings are reached in an independent way. And I know that if I tried to interfere in the findings of the Commissioner, he'd be the first person to tell me that that was not appropriate. So I have full respect for his independence. I do not know what he will recommend. I do not prejudge what he will recommend, but I am satisfied he'll do it in a fair and objective fashion based on his own independent judgment.
Noted. I asked this because there's also a concern as to why the selection of these, even the support staff, governor, to the commissioner, why wasn't that spread out among persons from other ethnic backgrounds other than those from the UK, and who are also working with the FCDO, who support the COI that was imposed on the BVI? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the fact that something is funded by a government doesn't mean it isn't independent. So, for example, the courts in BVI are funded from central budgets. That does not mean the BVI courts are not independent. And similarly, the fact that funding comes from the UK does not mean that the Commission of Inquiry is independent. One member of the overall team, the Secretary of the Commission, is on secondment from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but again, he is not subject to my direction or direction from London. The rest of the members of the Commission of Inquiry are not members of staff of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. They are there to support the work of the Commissioner in carrying out what he is seeking to do in a proper investigation of the mandate which has been given to him.
As it relates to ethnic background, again, one other question regarding the Commissioner himself. Persons think it might be a bit skewed. Do you think that it is fair then that we still have a sole commissioner overseeing this process? Why not, maybe 3 or 2, maybe one recommended by the leader of the opposition, one from the Premier, of course, one from the United Kingdom, to represent or possibly reflect an unbiased process? Because I hear you that it remains an independent process, independent of directive from the United Kingdom, but being that this represents the interest, or is being funded on monies provided by the FCDO, persons are really concerned about how independent it truly is. So what would you say to that particularly?
Well, on your first point, I don't judge anyone on their ethnicity, and we mustn't discriminate against any individual on the ground of their racial or ethnic background. Secondly, under the Commission of Inquiry Act, it would be possible to appoint a larger commission, but this judge is a very senior and highly experienced UK judge who has come here, I know, to look objectively at the facts, let people take a view once he has come to his recommendations and reached his conclusions. But I have seen no evidence, and indeed there is no evidence, that he is anything other than entirely independent in carrying out his work.
Awesome. Now, based on what your predecessor, of course, Governor Jaspert, imposed the COI on the BVI for, and with the public viewing of the proceedings that we've seen so far of the COI, it appears to be more of an issue with the administrative processes thus far. We're not calling a report on it, but just based on what we've been able to observe, these administrative processes needing to be updated. So as the present governor, do you agree with your predecessor then in saying that there is corruption in the BVI, and that was the basis on which the COI was launched?
The COI was established because of concerns over possible corruption and dishonesty It's for the COI itself to investigate those matters and then make findings and recommendations. But I believe my full support.
Are we still live? All right, viewers, we just had a short bit of technical difficulty. We do apologize for that, but we'd like to move right ahead. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. However, we're going to go to a very quick commercial break and we're going to come back, okay? Stick with us. Because it was...
Thank you.
Viewers, welcome back to 284 Media. Now, I want to thank you so much for sticking with us. Today, we are so honored to be sitting down with Governor of the Virgin Islands, Governor Rankin, and of course, we're diving into the COI and many other very important topics that may fall under his portfolio. Governor, thank you so much. I want to speak to the white paper just back in 2012, I believe. The governor's office, of course, which we know is responsible for public service here in the territory, would have signed a white paper agreeing to providing technical assistance and on-the-job training to build the expertise that we need here in the territory. Now, I want to speak to, again, doubling back to the administrative processes that we've seen being revealed in the COI. If training was indeed the issue, and being that the governor's office is essentially responsible for public service and bringing that up to par with funding from the UK, would your office then agree to taking any form of responsibility to some of the loopholes that we've seen or some of the administrative gaps we've seen exposed in the COI?
Absolutely. And in fact, we already do so. So through UK taxpayers' money, training and support is already given to members of the public service and to some of the other independent bodies under the Constitution, for example, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And we work in cooperation with individual departments to find out what training will assist them to build their skills, to better deliver services for people on the territory. So we do that now, and I fully expect and hope we will do that in the future.
So did you just say that you take partial responsibility for some of the loopholes we've seen in recent times? Did I understand you correctly?
If there are loopholes which fall to me as governor, then it will be my job to help to address them. And I do not shy away from the responsibility I have for helping to ensure good governance in the territory, and we do all I can to do so. That's not quite the same as saying I take responsibility for any loopholes at the moment to which you might be alluding. But let's see what the Commission of Inquiry says and where responsibility does fall to me, for example, in the areas of security and safety under the Constitution, for responsibility for compliance with international obligations. That's my job as Governor, and I will continue to do all I can to carry out those responsibilities.
Understood. Now, many persons are wondering what will be the next steps after Commissioner Hickenbottom prepares his report. Are you able to, at this time, outline what those steps will look like?
I need to wait and see the recommendations. So the Commission has been extended until the end of the year, early January. The Commissioner will make his recommendations. I do not know what those recommendations will be. Once they are received, then I will need to consider them as Governor and take decisions accordingly on next steps. But I cannot and must not prejudge what those recommendations will be.
Understood. Do you think that the sitting government will have the opportunity to possibly see and respond to the report before it is officially published?
Let me wait and see the recommendations. What I can tell you is that I will want to work cooperatively with the different institutions on this territory, including institutions of government, in making sure we can take forward the recommendations from the Commission of Inquiry in a positive way. It needs to be a partnership approach. Governor, UK, BVI, working together to address any issues of concern that need to be addressed, and people need to take responsibility locally, as well as myself as Governor in the UK, in moving forward.
Absolutely. I want to segue a little bit, Governor, to the COI Act itself. This is an act that was written back in the 1800s, and we do know that it was amended somewhat slightly just about 50 years ago. I think we both can agree that that may be that it's a bit antiquated based on not just the changing climate, but the challenges we've had in recent times and where we are now as a territory. Now, based on the current act, for example, when you look at the current act, the local lawyers within the COI process, they're not allowed to cross-question members of the COI office during these inquiries. And some persons being interviewed are even alluding to the fact that they're unable to come truly prepared based on the fact that they're not, the act doesn't allow for them to be informed on what will be asked, particularly at that hearing. So with that said, would you agree that if we truly want good governance, that the COI Act would need to be amended or at the very least modernized to represent a fairer process?
Well, the fact that something is old doesn't necessarily mean it's out of date. It's legislation which one could equally argue has stood the test of time. But people can take their own view because the Commission of Inquiry is operating in a transparent way. People can follow its hearings publicly. Those appearing before the Commission can have legal representation to assist them, and I leave it to others to judge whether anything that has occurred in the Commission so far has been unfair or improper. My own view is that the Commissioner has been very deliberate in making sure that people understand the questions that have been posed to them and have an opportunity to answer them fully. So I believe it's a transparent process. I know it's been widely watched across the territory, and my own view is that it has shed useful light on issues, and I hope it continues to do so.
Thank you. There are also some reports that some of the COI personnel have made application to the High Court Registry so that they can practice law, BVI law that is, in the process of conducting the COI. Are you aware of this, first of all, I must ask, and have they been practicing law in the BVI without the proper licenses, which is actually a criminal offense?
I don't believe so, but I know that the issue is an application has been made. The issue is currently being considered before the courts, and let's see what the outcome of those proceedings is. It would be wrong of me to comment in any further detail, but from all I have seen, I've got no reason to believe there's been any inappropriateness by the individuals involved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hickenbottom, of course, the Commissioner of the COI, has he in any way indicated to the Governor's group or office that there will be need for anyone from the Governor's office to go before the COI, considering their constitutional responsibility for the public service and also the fact that the police falls under the Governor within the framework of the BVI's shared government structure?
Yes, I fully expect to be invited to appear before the Commission myself. Indeed, I was scheduled to appear in July, but because of the delays in the process which have taken place, that was postponed. But I fully expected to be invited back myself to appear before the Commission in the autumn, and of course I shall fulfil my responsibilities in that regard. The Police Commissioner and indeed his predecessor have also appeared before the Commission already, so everybody is liable to be called before the Commission and to give their evidence to it, and I'll be happy to participate in that process myself.
Thank you so much. And finally, as it relates to that topic, are you in any way prepared to reassure the people of the BVI that the UK does not plan to suspend the Constitution after the COI report is completed, which would, of course, be a decision of the United Kingdom's government.
With respect, you're asking me to prejudge what the Commission may recommend, and I'm not going to do that. Let's see what the Commission recommends. So I'm certainly not ruling in what you've just suggested. It's a very hypothetical question. I'm not ruling anything in or out. Let's see what's recommended.
All right, Governor, I'd like to move on to the public service. We do know for years and years, residents of this territory have been really calling for a raise in salary as it relates to public servants. And I know most recently, a teacher took to social media in a very brave and candid move, I think, to outline the wages, the low wages that teachers are paid, even when, in her case, she would have achieved a master's level degree qualifications. We've also heard that the local government has submitted a detailed plan to your office for salary review as it relates to that particular topic, raising compensation for our public servants. I mean, yes, we were able to zero in on teachers recently, but as we examine the public service, there is a dire need for public servants to be paid more. We have also seen this resulting in a lot of our qualified locals resorting overseas just to ensure that they're receiving a healthy compensation for their worth. So as it relates to that, what would you say is the next step as it relates to the plan that government submitted to your office? And what can we look forward to as it relates to any form of increased compensations for teachers, but as well as other public servants?
Well, first, let me express my full respect for teachers and the importance of the work they do. I'm father myself of 3 children, now young adults, but I know that their education was absolutely key to their development, and good education for the young people at BVI represents the future of BVI and will help this territory to develop and be the best it can be. So I have great respect for what teachers do on a day-to-day basis and recognise the importance of their work. Secondly, under the Constitution, I have responsibility for the public service as a whole, and in particular, I want to have a well-qualified, skilled public service and an impartial public service operating without undue interference, but giving objective advice to government, to ministers and myself in their work. And a professional public service will serve this island well. On the specific question of financial compensation and financial pay, that with respect is not my decision. That's a matter which lies with the elected government, because finance is a devolved area and a responsibility of the government here. But I do know that the Honourable Premier has been engaging with teachers on this issue. I know that the Premier is keen to find a resolution to current challenges, and I hope that happens. We need a properly rewarded, well-paid public service within the funds which are available, and I will support solutions to that effect.
Funny enough, Governor, when this issue was brought up by the teacher in question, we spoke to the Minister for Education, which is, of course, representative of the government. His response was, public service falls on... No? Okay, we're still live viewers. We had a shortage in power a second ago, so we do apologize for that. But I just want to piggyback on what you said, Governor Rankin. When we were speaking about this particular teacher in question, we contacted our newsroom, myself in particular, contacted the Minister of Education on that topic as it relates to compensation, being that this is an age-old issue. This is nothing new. And the minister in particular said that the government cannot raise compensation in the territory. He said very specifically that public service falls under your office, and based on what I just heard you say, this responsibility now lies with the government of the Virgin Islands as it relates to compensation. I feel like public servants at this point feel like somewhat that this is political football. We want to be able to understand, based on the plan that was submitted to your office, what would be the next step and where this responsibility lies as it relates to raising compensation for public servants who we're really looking for our leaders to provide these answers.
The terms and conditions of public servants fall within my overall responsibility for the public service, but the budget available to pay teachers or other public servants is determined not by myself, but is determined by the elected government. And so I can only operate within the budget which is provided.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification, Governor. We do know, as it relates to COVID-19 as well, we've had it's been a rough time for us in this territory, but luckily within the last week or two, we've been really able to bring those numbers down. Our health care workers in particular have been working overtime to ensure that we slow the curve. But based on your seat as governor, what would you say is the overall assessment of the situation at the moment?
It's been a very difficult period, and I'd be concerned as anyone else about the severe outbreak of COVID that has occurred, leading to 37 deaths on the territory. And I repeat my condolences for all those who have lost loved ones. Fortunately, the number of active cases is going down, and I hope that that will continue. But as we try to return to normality, we've managed to relax some of the curfew and other restrictions. As people continue to travel, as people go back and forth to USVI, as people gather together within the community, the risk of further outbreaks isn't going to go away. And the best way for people to keep themselves safe and to keep others safe with whom they interact is to get vaccinated. So I've been very pleased at the rise in vaccinations, which we managed to achieve, particularly through the drive-through vaccination centre at the festival grounds and drive-through vaccination arrangements on Virgin Gorda as well. So we now have over 16,000 people in BVI have received their first dose of vaccine, and of those, over 12,000 have actually now been fully vaccinated. So that's good, but we need to get more. We need to get up to a rate of 75–80% of the population if we're going to have that level of immunity which is required to be able to stay safe. So my message to anyone who has not yet been vaccinated is please, please get vaccinated. That is the best protection for yourself and your loved ones. And I, as Governor, will continue to ensure that the UK will supply the vaccinations and other testing kits that BVI requires to ensure that this can be done.
Yes. Speaking about the vaccines, Governor Rankin, just to piggyback a little bit, like you said, the BVI was very fortunate to have inherited, by way of the UK's commitment to us as an overseas territory, over 30,000 vaccines. But we do know recently as well that quite a number of those vaccines were expired due to persons not being as forthcoming as they probably, as health officials would like them to be in taking the vaccine to slow this curve. What was the UK's response to those vaccines being expired? Was that in any way discouraging or a deterrent to the United Kingdom government?
Well, I regret, as I know does the Minister of Health, that any vaccines had to be destroyed because their use-by date had come up, and that's something that none of us want to happen again. So the drive was to increase the number of vaccinations. We made good progress in that respect, but didn't quite get to the level that we would want, so there's more work still to be done. Because these vaccines are indeed precious, and there's demand for vaccines all over the world. So the UK will continue to supply what this territory needs, but we all must be careful to make sure that the levels of supply exceed what is required and could lead to further destruction. And I and my team work very closely with the Chief Medical Officer and with the health team to get the numbers right to avoid that happening again. But none of this was deliberate. Nobody wanted vaccines to be destroyed, but they are precious vials which we need to try to ensure are used to the full.
And just how much was expired in the process? Are you aware of the number?
Well, I know it was over 700 vials. The Minister of Health made a statement in that respect, and of course there are a number of doses in each vial, so a figure somewhere between, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 doses, unfortunately, were not were not used. But as I say, that was not as a result of any lack of effort by individuals concerned. And what we ultimately need is people in BVI themselves to make that choice, to come forward, to take the vaccines, to help themselves and help to get BVI to a place of safety.
Understood. I know there's a lot of energy now being directed to the COVID-19 response, but Governor, we are also dealing with a parallel. We are literally in the midst of the hurricane season, even now as we see storms forming in the Atlantic. So I want to ask, with so much effort being divulged to COVID-19, how prepared are we as it relates to preparing for the hurricane season?
Well, we need to be prepared, and we are indeed now in hurricane season, and tropical storms have already come through this region, and the prediction is we may be in for a higher than average storm and hurricane season. So my responsibility is to work with the Department of Disaster Management in making sure that all of the essential services are prepared both in advance of a hurricane and after a hurricane to respond to the territory's needs. And the National Disaster Management Council has met and has reviewed the preparation of each of the essential services in that regard. And we need to keep on doing that constantly until we reach the end of hurricane season. I myself came to BVI after Hurricane Irma and saw for myself the devastation that had been caused, and I was here during Hurricane Maria, so I know how important the responsibilities are in this area, and of course I have a particular responsibility for ensuring any UK support that may be necessary in response should we have a repetition of such dreadful events. But we need also individual businesses and individual families to take their own responsibility. So I join in urging everyone to make their homes and apartments as secure as possible, to die down and secure any loose items, and to have those emergency provisions in place. We don't know when a hurricane may strike. It's better to be prepared now than to be scrabbling around in the final moments before a hurricane may be hitting. So please prepare, please be as safe as possible, and I will do all I can to make sure that the essential services on this territory are ready to respond and help individuals. Excellent.
What about shelters, Governor? What updates can you provide us with as it relates to the shelters in particular?
I've inspected a number of the shelters which have been prepared for the upcoming season. I've been inspected particularly shelters in Tortola, which I went round with a colleague from the disaster management team, and I was impressed by what I saw. Safe places for those who do not have secure, safe places to stay to go together during a hurricane. So again, more to be done. We need to keep on making sure those places are secure, but I know a lot of work has happened. I know there's more to be done in some of the sister islands in particular in that regard, but I welcome the work that has been done so far.
And what about being COVID prepared as well? I know that's another element we really need to take into consideration now that we're dealing with COVID in the midst of this hurricane season. Can you speak to what measures are in place to ensure that in the event that persons have to resort to these shelters, that we can really mitigate some of the challenges associated with COVID-19?
We need to ensure that the usual messages and facilities are in place. Face masks, sanitization, regular washing of hands, and keeping to the extent possible social distancing. Now, I recognise that social distancing point may be a particular challenge. We may have to have people working together in bubbles so that families are together, but then there are spaces and distances between them. But I recognise your question. It's a particular challenge dealing with the COVID situation during hurricane season. What I do know is that those responsible for the shelters and those people who will be helping to organise them are keenly aware of the risks and will be doing all they can to minimise them.
Awesome. As it relates to security, which also falls under your portfolio, Governor Rankin, one of the concerns we've had recently, as it relates to the recent surge, in particular, where we saw over 1,600 cases, and like you mentioned, over 37 deaths. Persons would have been alleging that that outbreak was stemmed to a breach of the border, our porous border system. And we've heard this in the past. So I need to ask, under your portfolio and your responsibility, what is being done to address the issues we have as it relates to border security? And whether, as well, can you substantiate whether indeed that recent surge was linked to a breach in the border security?
The security and safety of BVI, including its borders, is my responsibility, my primary responsibility under the Constitution, and I don't shy away from it. And particularly the risks we have from illicit drugs, which are a scourge on a community, illegal firearms, and the risk of human trafficking all need to be tackled. And so I work closely together with the Police Commissioner and his team and those responsible for maritime security to protect our borders as best we can. And I welcome the seizures which the police have made towards the end of last year, as well as this year, in terms of illegal firearms and capture of illicit drugs. On the specific question you ask, I'm not aware of any clear evidence to the effect that human trafficking has been the cause of the COVID outbreak here, and I've heard nothing to that effect from the Chief Medical Officer. COVID is going to come in one way or another. Unless we closed our borders to everybody, had no travel back and forth to USVI or to Puerto Rico or to mainland United States or anywhere else, there's a risk of COVID coming in and of course spreading within the community. There's going to be no one single source or one single cause, and that's why vaccination is so important. And that's why we need to address this by taking responsibility within the territory for getting people vaccinated. But to answer your specific question, no, I'm not aware of any such evidence.
Thank you so much. As it relates to security as well, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force also falls under your responsibility. In recent times, we have seen officers being caught in the midst of corruption. Just recently, an officer was arrested in relation to the January over $200 million cocaine bust. Just a few months prior to that, the biggest bust in BVI's history, officers also involved. So I must ask, what is being done to address possible internal corruption within the police force, which of course the current police commissioner have confirmed that they are acts of corruption within the force. What is being done as it relates to security to ensure that we're stamping out levels of corruption, those levels of corruption within the police force?
I have great respect for the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force as a whole and for the Police Commissioner with whom I work closely. But yes, there have been a number of cases where it appears officers have been involved in wrongdoing and they need to be held to account. And I am determined that that should be the case, as is the Police Commissioner, and a number of police officers have already been charged in relation to the matters which you raise. Where there is wrongdoing, where there is corruption, where there is crime, it must be tackled. It must be tackled within the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, for which I have responsibility, and it must be tackled wherever it may arise in the territory in any agency.
All right. Now, Governor, as we begin to wrap up, I have a few questions from our viewers. We usually give our viewers the opportunity to ask a question or two based on our, of course, our time here, which is very special with you at 284 Media. I know you're a very busy man. Of course, I'm so honored to have you, but I would really like to pose just a few questions from our guests. One of them is regarding the recent controversy following political advisors being given to the government of the Virgin Islands, or being assigned to the government of the Virgin Islands to the tune of some over $1 million, according to the leader of the opposition. According to government, just about $800,000. What are your thoughts on this move? And if anything, what would you like to say regarding that?
My main concern in relation to that proposal, as in relation to any other, is that the Constitution is respected, and in this regard in particular, that the impartiality of the public service continues. And so my concern there was to ensure that the ministerial policy advisors do not have a power of direction or instruction of the public service, and that public service departments will remain under the supervision of their permanent secretary. So that was the issue with which I was concerned on that point, and that was the issue which I discussed with the government, and where I received a degree of satisfaction. The wider question of the appropriateness of policy advisors and of the justification for spend is a domestic political issue, not one that is appropriate for me to get involved in as governor, and that's for others to take a view on.
All right, and another question from the viewers regarding schools. For quite a number of years, I think our children have been displaced and really having to dwell in an environment that is not conducive, for study. When you think about the ramifications of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, and us not being able to get back to a place that is comfortable for our kids to learn. And just recently, announcements by the Minister of Education that school will resume from August 23rd, hybrid, and of course face-to-face from September. Persons are of the opinion that enough is not being done for the schools to be repaired, in particular the high school, to get our children back to a place where they're not just comfortable, but where there is a fair and healthy learning environment to give them a fair opportunity to learn. What are your thoughts on the state of schools? And of course, as a result of our buildings being unfinished, the children now having to resort back to a shift system some 3-4 years post Irma and Maria.
It's been a tough time for young people, as it has been for their teachers. It's been a disruptive period in their education, and I recognise the key importance of education for their development and indeed for the future of everybody within BVI. I've had the privilege of visiting a number of schools in the territory, both primary schools and secondary schools, and was pleased to attend some of the graduation ceremonies a month or so back. And I've been impressed by what has been achieved and what young people have been able to achieve in these difficult circumstances. But I recognise there's more to be done. And the more we can get back to tackling those issues of school buildings, the more we can get back to normality, as hopefully we bring COVID under control, has my full support, and the Minister of Education and the government will have my full support, the more they can take that agenda forward.
Noted. I want to pan across to similarly, I think, security as well. I really want to ask you this question as it relates to the prison. I know currently it is under the Ministry of Health. It was under Health, it was changed to Education, and now it's back under Health. But based on what we've seen in the last 18 months as a result of COVID-19, health is definitely strained. And based on what we've seen as well from internally inside the prison, rehabilitation has been suffering for quite a number of years, Governor. There seemingly is not enough monies allocated. When we look at the budget, every year we see a seeming reduction in the amount that is allocated to the prison. We're hearing reports that simple things like officers needing uniforms, equipment. We're hearing getting basic things like pencils, paper, ink has been a challenge for the prison facility. So with that said, I must ask, is there any form of consideration being given, just considering the similarities in security and how it may merge with your portfolio? Is any consideration being given to move the prison from under Health currently to the governor's security portfolio, just to ensure that we are properly rehabilitating, but not only that, preparing our inmates for reintegration into the community?
Thank you. In fact, the prison is already a split responsibility. So the security of the prison continues to rest with me as governor. Some of the other matters to which you refer fall to the Health Ministry, and so we work together in a cooperative fashion to try to address those issues. I have been pleased that we've managed to get a number of not just prison officers but inmates in the prison vaccinated against COVID to try to keep people safe there. And you will recall that following the stabbings and dreadful murder that took place at the prison, there is a police investigation taking place. A number of prisoners have been questioned in relation to that, and I have ordered an external review of security at the prison in agreement with the members of the National Security Council, which I hope will get going in the autumn once we're through the immediate COVID restrictions. But to get further to your question, prison is partly about keeping individuals who may wish to commit crimes out of the community, but it's also about rehabilitation and helping prisoners when they come out of prison to reintegrate and to find a useful purpose in their lives. So there are budgetary restraints here as in any other area. There's not a magic money tree, but the more we can invest in education and support for prisoners in that rehabilitation work, then that will have my support as well.
Thank you so much, Governor. As we look at a broad overview of what's been happening as it relates to COVID-19, what would you say overall, or how would you rate our response thus far to the pandemic? And what can we do as a territory? And I'm speaking government, I'm speaking the populace as well, of course, officials within the various offices. Collectively, what can we do to pivot our way forward? And I know lots of persons are even hopeless in this situation considering the financial constraints brought on by COVID-19. What advice do you want to give to persons as we move forward through this era?
Let me pay tribute to the work that has been done, to the frontline medical staff, those at the hospital, those administering the vaccines, those carrying out the testings, and the voluntary organisations offering support in that area, from the Red Cross, from Rotary, from Lions, all of whom are doing their best to keep us safe. And let me thank individual business owners, individual businesses who are supporting their staff in getting vaccinated and having safe and secure operations in which people can work and people visiting their businesses can operate in. So a lot has been done already, and let me start by paying tribute to that. I also welcome the fact that, having had this dreadful spike, that the number of active cases has gone down, but we are not out of the woods yet by any means. And so we all need to continue in our individual behaviour, to be masking up, maintaining social distancing, to using sanitation, washing our hands, taking care for ourselves and for our loved ones. But my message again has to be vaccination. I know some people are fearful, some people are worried about that, but the science is clear, and the best way to keep yourself safe and keep your loved ones safe is to get vaccinated.
Now, recently, there was a lot of controversy regarding the passing of the bill that would allow for the government to receive additional benefits. Persons are calling it, there's a new terminology they're using, the greedy bill. I know there are quite a number of legislations on the table, Governor. Can you speak to not only that piece of legislation that was passed, but also what is the status on other pieces of legislation that were brought to your cabinet? I know quite over a year ago, in particular, the marijuana legislation was brought to your office by way of the House of Assembly, yet to be assented on. Please provide us with a detailed update on those legislations, and particularly why you were comfortable with passing the recent legislation as well.
I've assented to virtually all the legislation that has come to me since I've been governor. Much of that legislation is to address challenges on a cross-party basis and to help to meet the territory's needs. And my job as governor is to support work in that area. And of course, I respect the democratic process. There are 3 pieces of legislation which currently are on my desk to which I have not as yet assented. The first is the Disaster Management Bill. As we know from our earlier conversation, security, including disaster management and responsibility for external assistance, lies with me as governor, and people are aware of the assistance which was given following Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. That piece of legislation would involve a fundamental transfer of responsibility, and the Disaster Management Department would move from the governor's group to becoming under political control. And my view is that that is a central issue which, if it's going to be addressed, would be better addressed as part of a wider constitutional review. But for the moment, I believe for the safety and security of the territory, the best thing is the current arrangements remain in place as we move up to the current hurricane season in particular. The other 2 pieces of legislation relate to marijuana, and you mentioned in particular the medical marijuana legislation. And actually, I hope that that can be assented to in due course. What is lacking is that in order to have medical marijuana safely operating within the territory, it needs to be done in a properly licensed fashion, and it needs to be done in compliance with the United Nations International Narcotics Convention, which govern these areas. So what we need to do is to establish a well-qualified licensing authority here in BVI, working with the licensing authority in the UK, who are responsible for the overall international obligations guarantees in this area. And if we can do that, then we can move ahead in the field of medical marijuana. So that's the work that I've been urging will take place. And if that can take place, if we can get that well-established licensing arrangement in place, then I hope that I can in due course assent to the marijuana legislation, medical marijuana legislation bill.
So you're saying that we must, in order to get that assented to, establish that licensing authority that will, of course, collaborate or at least cooperate with the authority in the United Kingdom to move forward on this legislation.
That's right. We're talking here about medicine. And so any medicine has to be safely produced, safely administered and properly licensed to allow people to get whatever benefits there may be from medicinal marijuana. And the UK has responsibility for ensuring that happens in a safe way across the territories for which it is responsible, because there are international obligations in this area if you're going to license medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is licensed in the United Kingdom. I have a good friend, I won't go into personal details, but she requires that for her medical treatment and is able to access it in the UK. So what we need to do here, there's not a problem in principle, what we need to do here is to have a well-qualified, well-established licensing authority. The UK can assist with that respect, working with its UK opposite numbers, and if we can do the necessary work, quite detailed work, to develop that, then there is no reason in principle why I cannot assent to the medical marijuana legislation.
Thank you.
But it requires work to be done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for making that clarification. Now, Governor, in closing, what would you like to say to wider BVI as it relates to all of your portfolios, what you have been able to do since taking up office here in the territory thus far, and what the near future looks like under your office, of course, sorry.
Well, it's certainly been the first busy period for me as governor. My first job was to get to know and understand the territory, not just here in Tortola, but also in each of the sister islands, which I have, of course, been able to visit and get to know members of the community here, to help me to better carry out my responsibilities. And that is what I will continue to do as governor so long as I am in office. So my responsibilities for security and safety, my responsibilities for the police, my responsibility for an independent, impartial public service, and my responsibility for compliance with international obligations, and working constructively with the elected government and other stakeholders in doing so. I'm optimistic. There are huge challenges because of COVID. We have the current hurricane season, which we need to get through this year and every other year in terms of making sure we can be as safe as possible. And of course, we have the work of the Commission of Inquiry, which I recognise is difficult for some people, but which I believe is necessary to better address governance needs within the territory. So my determination is to carry through that work, which I believe can help everybody in BVI and will lead to a successful, better BVI. So that's my pledge. I'll work as hard as I can to continue to work in that area, and I hope we can make good, positive progress.
And Governor John Rankin, I want to thank you so much for finding time, of course, to sit with us amidst your busy schedule, and of course for leading the charge as you have thus far. And of course, pray that you continue the conversation with us. I know you have always been very forthcoming with media, and I trust that that continues. So I want to thank you for, again, making the time to speak with us, and wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. And a free and independent media has my full support. And thank you for your questions today.
Absolutely. Thank you, viewers. That was His Excellency Governor John Rankin. He is the governor of the Virgin Islands, speaking on quite a myriad of issues, topics here in the territory that are taking the forefront as it relates to important conversations, questions that needs answers here. And of course, at 284 Media, we keep that at the forefront of what we do. So we want to thank you so much for joining us. And I want to encourage you that while this interview may be over, to join us again at 6 p.m. where my colleagues Kamal Haynes and Ron Grant will be bringing you your daily dose of 284 News. So until then, have a beautiful afternoon. Bye-bye.